Hi everyone, welcome to My Rising Rose. I've been really enjoying creating these videos and doing more channelings for all of you and reading the comments and responding to people. And one of the things that I've been asking is that people ask some questions that I can get to and give you some of my thoughts and feelings on what's coming up for you. So I had some questions come through from Matt in the comments. And I'm just going to read some of those out for you and then give an answer to you. Bear in mind, this is all coming from my own perspective and my own experience. So whenever anyone is delivering opinions to you about these different spiritual topics, it's really important to keep in mind that what they are giving is an opinion. So what I am giving is an opinion. And this is a really, really important point because some people who are in a position as a spiritual teacher will talk with absolute authority on topics and speak as if they are giving the ultimate answer to things, when actually all they're giving is an opinion. They're giving their opinion, even if it's their opinion of something really profound and the experience is genuine that they're talking about, it's still an opinion, and there are countless ways to awaken. There are countless ways to perceive reality, and just because we are having a vivid, profound and real experience of one of those perspectives does not mean that the others aren't true, and that our opinion is somehow more than an opinion. So with that in mind, Matt has asked, why do we need intervention of deities? Aren't we directly linked to the source? Well, yes. So I would frame it this way. Okay, so imagine if you take deities out of the picture. I assume that Matt is coming from this more non-dual oriented perspective. For those of you who aren't familiar, non-duality is a system of thought that usually traces back to Advaita Vedanta, in Hinduism, of which one of the very famous teachers was Ramana Maharshi, but another one was Nisargadatta Maharaj. And non-duality is very popular in the West, and has a very big following with some big names in that kind of field. A few of those names are people like Adyashanti, Rupert Spira, and there'll be many, many more that you could point out. So I feel like he's asking the question from that because he's talking about source, and I think he mentions non-duality somewhere later in these questions, because this is the first of a few different questions that he asks. Aren't we already directly linked to source? Well, if you are looking at someone like Nisargadatta Maharaj or Ramana Maharshi, you could say, well, why do we need to listen to teachers like Nisargadatta or any of the names that I've just mentioned? Well, if we're directly linked to source, then there's no point, because what can that person show you that you aren't already? But of course, we don't fully realize that we are source. So everything is source, but source has taken a form where it has forgotten that it's source, and so needs to go through some kind of remembrance where source remembers itself as source within the specific form of your humanity. And typically throughout human history, there have been human beings who have guided that for others. Like Ramana Maharshi had a spontaneous spiritual awakening similar to Eckhart Tolle, and from that he became awake to his own nature, realizing that he is source, and then he began teaching that to other people, and they began realizing that they are source. So that's one way that it can happen. And if you're saying, well, why do we need the intervention of deities? Well, why do we need the intervention of Ramana Maharshi? Why do we need the intervention of Nisargadatta Maharaj? You can look at the beings that I channel as similar to Ramana Maharshi or Nisargadatta Maharaj. Like, they are mystics. And they're here to help to illuminate our own understanding of ourselves as source. They are aware that we all are source. I would argue they're aware of it more deeply than people like Ramana Maharshi or Nisargadatta Maharaj, because their form permits them to realize it on a far deeper level than within a human form. That's my personal opinion. And if you're looking for a kind of validation within the non-dual framework for that, then you could look at someone like Ramana Maharshi, who, when given the gift of a photo of, or an image of Lord Krishna, he burst into tears. Like, he was aware of the incredible self-awareness of some of these deities and revered them. And why wouldn't we do the same? Why wouldn't we receive the guidance of interdimensional beings who are so highly realized? It would be like burning all of your mystical books because you don't think that, because you're saying that, well, I'm source already, so why do anything? You know, we do it because we're in a process of realizing, in a process of living. So we, as source, can engage in the dragons as source, as the goddesses as source, as other human beings as source, as ourselves as source, all of that. So I hope that answers that question. I'm just going to have a quick read through because there's a few more questions down here. So he says, one thing I learned through life is that there is no free lunch down here. So what is the price of deities' support? Well, that's an interesting question. So I'll answer that from the perspective that the dragons have said a few different times. So let me put it this way. Imagine that there's a place where there is absolutely no suffering and everything is a heavenly perfection. And imagine that for this heavenly perfection to go through a state of evolution, it needs to lose sight of its own heavenly perfection. And by doing so, it can evolve itself by moving back and forth between the absence of heavenly perfection and the presence of heavenly perfection. But in order to do that, parts of itself have to become disconnected from that heavenly perfection. They have to lose the most important and most incredible thing. But they do so for the evolution of the whole. Now, those beings are making a massive sacrifice. A massive sacrifice. So the way that the dragons see it, they are still within that place of heavenly perfection. And we are some of the beings who have sacrificed our place within it in order for the whole to grow. They are also a part of the whole, which means that our sacrifice directly profits them, because the growth of all of life requires it, and they are part of all of life. So, as they have said, you are not indebted to us. We ask nothing from you. We ask none of that. We are here to pay off our debt to you. We are the ones who are indebted. We are the ones who need to make the payment. And they make the payment through energetic transfer, by helping us to remember our knowledge and returning us to the cosmic family. You could put it another way, that they are very aware that we are all one being, and the earth is kind of like wounded. You could imagine it like it's say the left hand got wounded, and then the earth is within the left hand, and then they are part of the right hand, which isn't wounded. Well, the right hand will just aid the left hand. There wouldn't be any requirement of receiving anything in return, because the left hand and the right hand are both the body. So the right hand healing the left hand is just the body healing the body. So there wouldn't be any, they wouldn't want anything in return for that. In fact, they see it the other way around. They feel that we are the ones who are giving, not them. So let me just have another look through here then. What kind of bounds are we creating with these? What kind of bonds are we creating with these beings by asking their support? We are creating energetic pathways between them and us in much the same way as a leaf connecting with a branch. So they are there all the time anyway. It's just that we're disconnected from them and we don't experience that connection directly. A bit like a leaf that has disconnected itself from a branch. Or if you think of the example of cancer. So cancer cells within the human body, they can be disconnected from the body's signals. So the body is signaling to all the different cells within the body at all times, but sometimes cells become damaged and they lose the ability to receive those signals. And when that happens, it's like they go rogue. They forget that they're part of a body and they think that they just have to fend for themselves, and they form colonies that are all damaged in the same way. And that's one description of cancer. So you could say that we're in a cancerous state in terms of our consciousness. Human beings have become disconnected from the earth, disconnected from one another, disconnected from the supernatural beings, disconnected from the cosmos through a form of energetic damage that has taken place, and we've become cancerous. We actually think that we are separate from the body of the cosmos, and we've formed this colony where we try to keep ourselves alive as if we aren't connected to the cosmos, as if our life doesn't depend on the cosmos, as if there isn't a greater intelligence beyond us that would be far better at guiding us than our own very limited, disconnected consciousness. So let me just reread this question again. What kind of bonds are we creating with these beings by asking for their support? So what we're doing is we are returning ourselves to a state of sanity, and we are just remembering the bonds that have always been there. We are just remembering that. So that turns us from a state of cancerousness into a state of health again, where we're living in support of the body. And in this analogy of the body, you could imagine the dragons as arteries and veins flowing through the body. So it makes sense for muscle cells, for example, to be working in alignment with blood vessels. Because if we don't work in alignment with blood vessels, and we're like resisting them or imagining that they don't exist, then we're just pushing away something that is essential for our life and for our functioning as a being. So we're just remembering what has always been there and forming a healthy and correct relationships with it. Let me just read through this for 1 second. Okay, I feel alone and I would miss the protection of a mighty wolf mother, where he's referring to Morgana here, who said that she's very protective, like a wolf mother, and protective of her children. But again, why should I need an external protection? Don't I have everything inside me to clarify and dissolve obstacles? Well, if you're really aware of, so you're pointing to a non-dual realization there, like, well, if everything's inside of me, then why would I need anything external? If you really understand that realization, then you know that everything that is internal is external, and everything that is external is internal. You understand the non-duality of things. So the idea that the goddess that I'm channeling is separate from you or I is delusional. It's ignorance, as like the mystics would call it, because there is only one self. So the self that is Morgana is the self that is Jack, is the self that is Matt, is the self that is everyone watching this and not watching this. So there's only one self. So, so if there's only one self, why wouldn't the Jack body part of that seek protection from another part of it? Using the body analogy again, you could see Morgana as like a white blood cell. Like she is a part of the body that is here to protect and to cleanse. So our purpose in a way is to be in right relationship with her, so that we can receive her benefits and she can receive the support of us, and that the whole body can work in harmony. There are parts of the body that are kind of almost like an autoimmune disease, like we're self-destructing, and you can see that all around you in humanity, but that also happens within spiritual planes as well. And lots of the spiritual texts throughout time have talked about this kind of battle between good and evil, but really it's just a kind of the part of the true self that is self-aware and the part of the true self that is not self-aware, flowing back and forth between itself in a dance that enables the evolution of life. Hopefully that answers some of the questions. So you can draw upon her support to dissolve the obstacles because she is you. She's not external to you. Why are these beings not willing to dissolve back in the source? Aren't they tired as we are to have to sustain their individual identity? So my personal view of some of the non-dual teachings is that I see there as being some kind of major faults with some of the interpretations, like the idea that the highest, our greatest achievement is to kind of completely dissolve ourselves into formlessness. Personally, I see it like, well, formlessness is the primordial reality which gives rise to the endless rippling lesser realities that exist dependent upon it, which most people would call their life, and is the realm of our own forms. Like, why would we want to end that? Like, why? Like, what is lacking in the reality of form, where one would want to escape from it in order to just dwell as the formless? You already are the formless, and you always have been, and you always will be. Why not dance here in the relative and realize the formless within all form? Like, personally, it doesn't make sense to me, this kind of fantasy. I see it as to be completely honest with you, I see it as an escapist fantasy, it derived of a fear of suffering. So we fear suffering in form, so we seek the absence of suffering in the formless. But that in itself, that desire to escape is just more suffering. You know, it's just more knots to become entangled with. Like, why not just love this life? Why not surrender to the beauty and profound transformative power of suffering? Why run away from yourself? It doesn't make sense to me, this that whole notion, and I know that there'll be many people who disagree with that, but personally I don't really prescribe to that. So and then if you're talking about these beings, well, it would be the same. It's like, well, they know that they are source, so why would they want to leave the relative to become what they already are? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, why not just enjoy fulfilling themselves as the form that they are for the temporary period that they are that form? Why not enjoy the beauty of the relative? Why not appreciate that all forms inevitably die. And because of our impermanence on the level of form, form has a tragic beauty to it that dwelling in the formless alone would never even be conceivable. So I see it kind of like that. Why are these... Oh, okay, yeah, that's the same one. Why would we need to personify what I see as the natural flow of prana or the chi through the chakras? And he's saying this is especially for the dragons. Is that a way consciousness is using to touch some people and wake them up? So again, I think there's this misunderstanding of internal and external. I think that you are perceiving a division that doesn't actually exist. So you can see the chi and the prana as the dragons, both internally and externally. So within is without, and without is within. So the flow of the kundalini through the body and the flow of the dragons through the cosmos are one and the same. They are mirrored images of the same thing, which are kind of like a finer level of resolution of the Supreme Self, like the different layers of the self and how the self interacts with itself in order to give rise to relativity and absolute levels and all in between. How does the whole kind of lattice work of self interact with itself in order to create the majesty of the cosmos that we all experience? I feel that from my perspective, it's like you're pointing to a division that isn't actually there, and then it's almost difficult for me to answer because in a sense I don't understand the question, or I don't understand the kind of the perception that the question is coming from. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just taking my mind into my own realization of the unity that I'm trying to give words to, and through the energetic expression of it shining through my body, I'm sending out the realization rather than trying to explain it logically. So I'm just going to do that for a moment now. And I think that's really the answer, actually, to all of your questions. It's fine to be at a place where you need logic to try to make sense of things, but the logic of your mind is never going to be sufficient to truly understand any of these points, because they aren't ideas, they're realities. So my advice is actually to step away from this attempt to intellectually understand any of this, and instead to just allow yourself to receive the energy. There's a famous non-dual teacher called Adyashanti, who was a good friend of my teacher, and he used to say that when he went to his teacher, so Adyashanti going to his teacher's house, that she used to say to him and to the others who were there, the other students, she would say, "Listen to my words like you listen to the rain." And I agree with that, and I that's my recommendation to you, actually. Stop listening to my words like you're listening to a lecture, and listen to my words like you're listening to the rain. That will serve you far better, and then you can let go of these things. You know, like Nisargadatta used to say when students would come to him and have lots of intellectual concepts about spirituality, and some of them would sound very knowledgeable and like they'd really read a lot, heard a lot of talks, and he used to get angry, and he would get a stick and he would bang it into the ground, and he would say, concepts, concepts, concepts. Right? It's true that what is within you is already source and already knows everything, but it's also true that you don't have access to it, and so you're not truly receiving your own knowledge. You're ignorant of your own knowledge. And the way to discover it again isn't to use the intellect, because the intellect is what is disconnecting you from your own knowledge, the knowledge of your heart that will shine through you as your own spirit if you just let go of the need to know on the level of your mind. You already know within your heart, so just let go of trying to know with your mind and allow your heart to bloom, and then your heart will answer all of your questions for you. That's the journey that I've been on. I didn't used to know these things, and in many ways I still don't know these things. The words that are coming out of my mouth right now, in a sense, aren't even mine. They're flowing out of me from a deeper place, which could be said to be more truly who and what I am, though in a way so different to the personality as to not be describable like that. So, I think there may be some more questions. Just give me one moment. Okay, even if in all your channeling I find the same wiseness we can find in many spiritual teachings, as Nisargadatta Maharaj would say, do not pray any deities but your own. Do not pray to any deities but your own consciousness, self, presence, absolute source. With all my respect, I would be interested to get feedback from you, the Morrigan, and or some of the dragons on that. Yeah, so context here would be really helpful in who Nisargadatta was talking to at that moment. So he could have been speaking to someone who was, because he's Indian, right? Nisargadatta is Indian. He taught in what used to be called Bombay. I can't actually remember the name of the one city now. So many of his students were Indian people. So there's a cultural difference there. Like, imagine that there's an Indian person who is really obsessed with certain deities and is externalizing them. So seeing them as something separate from themselves and is worshipping them in an attempt to kind of get something for themselves, then it might be really good advice to say to that person, stop thinking about these deities, just focus on the source of all things. Like, what is kind of the true self of everything, your own nature. And also Nisargadatta is speaking from a certain tradition. I'm not sure if it was literally Advaita Vedanta, but it's I know that it has some commonality there in a similar way to Ramana Maharshi. And that's what they taught in that tradition. But that doesn't make it absolutely true or the only way to go into deep realizations. In Tantra, for example, they would teach very differently. But that doesn't mean that one is right and the other is wrong. It just means that they're pointing to the same source and giving different directions, which can give different results once we start to connect with source. Source can ripen in different ways depending on our journey toward it. And it's always going to be different, right? Nisargadatta had his journey into his realizations that he had received from his guru, and then he shared that same technique. So that's what he's doing. He's sharing his opinions, and they're opinions that are built on a really deep realization and a long tradition of spiritual teaching, but there's still opinions, and there's still just one direction at which we can access source. In the tantric traditions, which I don't know a huge about, but I do know that one of the practices is to move your sense of self from your body to that of deities, and then back again. And that's considered a high-level practice in Tantra, and it dissolves the personal ego, because it's seen that the personal ego can just shift. So I can shift from being Jack to being the Morrigan, for example. Like, that's a different, it's a different way of experiencing realization, which isn't to say that one is right and one is wrong. So you could pray to deities as a way of experiencing realization, and in fact that's taught in many traditions, more the bhakti kind of path, if we're still talking about Hinduism. It's just Nisargadatta just wanted to go directly to the source, but you could go to any of the beings that I'm channeling and see them as the source, to know the source in them, and to allow them to illuminate the source in you, because the energy that they're shining forth is the energy of our being. It's our being. So all they are doing is serving as a mystic, in the same way as Nisargadatta does. It's just that they have a slightly different approach. So you could follow Nisargadatta's advice and do it that way, and if that aligns to you, then that's a great thing to do. Or you can follow the kind of energy transmissions that I'm working with. And my feeling with all of this is that we should all attempt to find the path that fits us best for this current moment in our life. So there are times when sorry, I'm just checking that I'm actually recording this, because I've had some problems with recordings recently, so I was just checking that's all working. So it's really important that we just find our own path. A friend of mine has written a book about this. I won't name him directly, because I know he values his privacy. But he's written a book about this, and he was a monk he's an American man, and he was a monk in Southeast Asia in the Theravadan tradition for a time. And Theravadan tradition is fairly similar to Nisargadatta's approach. He was a monk for a while in one of these monasteries, but he was doing all this vipassana practice, lots and lots of vipassana, but it wasn't really working for him, and just felt blocked around it. And then a monk came from another monastery and was practicing loving kindness and led a retreat on loving kindness, and he did that retreat, and it was absolutely amazing. Everything that he was looking for within vipassana it came to him through loving kindness. And he went up to the abbot of his monastery after thinking about it a lot, and was like, I'm going to leave the monastery. And what the abbot said to him was, I can't believe that you're quitting already. So really guilt-tripped him, but he left anyway, and he created an incredible life for himself, and has gone on many amazing spiritual journeys, and is, in my opinion, really deeply realized in many ways, and also very grounded and integrated and humble with all of that. The point that he makes in his book, where he describes this story, is that we all need to find the place that is actually truly right for us. We may think that the right way is maybe vipassana or something else, but the key is actually just finding out which one works for you, which one's right for you, and then sticking to that, working with that, and then moving when you need to, moving when the time is right. So for myself, I started with more, self-inquiry, like Nisargadatta would encourage and Ramana Maharshi would encourage, and I had a Kundalini awakening from that. And I'd been having realizations before then. I realized the witness consciousness and was having experiences of unity consciousness before that. And it was when I started practicing that I had this Kundalini awakening, and that's when all the extra dimensions opened. So I started experiencing, having out-of-body experiences and meeting angels, and that eventually led to the connection with the goddesses and the dragons, who I know as my own self. And they emphasize it over and over again. So even right now, as we're talking, I can feel them, and I can feel their presence, and it's like my body is translucent. It's like my body is almost like a hollow shell, and light and awareness is just shining through all of that and in all directions. And in some places in those directions, I sense the distant, or it's kind of close and distant presence of the dragons and of the goddesses. I know where they are within the space of my field, and I feel them there, and I feel my connection to them, and I know them as myself, so that their energy is so familiar. It's like looking in a mirror. I know that they aren't other than me. And that, to me, is actually a deeper realization than dissolving into the nothingness of Source. It's realizing unity and allowing that realization of unity to expand and keep expanding, not only within the human physical plane, but beyond, to allow it all to open into the multidimensional plane and then also experience that there. So for me, the unity that I'm talking about is a kind of, in my own experience and in my own journey, it was a step after some of those non-dual realizations that get talked about. And it was actually, in many ways, more challenging to integrate than the purely non-dual realizations, because for my psyche to open in order to form those connections, it in some ways had to shatter. So it's difficult to go through that kind of transition. So I hope that this answers your questions. It's, for me, if I'm being completely honest, the questions that you've asked have kind of rubbed up against some resistances that I have in myself, because I've ventured into these non-dual circles, and I know them pretty well. I know people who have been teachers in those fields, some of them pretty well-respected teachers. I know other people who work behind the scenes for well-respected teachers. I've gone on my own personal experiences, both seeing behind the scenes and being in the audiences at these kinds of events, and I am pretty aware of the non-dual scene and the concepts and ideas and energies within the non-dual scene, and I have a lot of problems with it, to be completely honest, and I think that there's a lot that's missing. I think there's a really big lack of integration. I think there's an obsession with realizing a non-dual state, or realizing the state of nothingness, and then trying to wear that as a crown and trying to use it to escape from our personal life, and a real unwillingness to actually truly integrate our and have an actual non-dual experience, because a non-dual experience wouldn't ever negate the relative. It wouldn't ever push the relative experience away in favor of the absolute. That isn't non-duality. Non-duality is the union of the absolute and the relative. The realization of the wave as the ocean, It's not just diving into the ocean and ignoring the wave, you know. And I think those are really important points, and personally I haven't seen them be very well understood in the non-dual scene. So when I read your questions, I felt a kind of prickliness inside of me of oh no, not this. A kind of oh no, not this kind of feeling. But I wanted to address it because I was talking to a friend recently who was in a forum that was similar, where similar kind of goals of the absolute end of suffering and the absolute end of emotion seemed to be very high goals. And he was trying to encourage people to actually embody their humanity in their lives. He was accused of spreading false dharma, and I don't know if he was kicked out of that group or whether he just left, but in some way he left. And while I was talking to him, I was thinking, I never get involved in stuff like that. I don't want to get involved in that. And then I saw your questions, Matt, and something in me just wanted to answer them. And on a personal level, I can feel that there are resistances in me toward the non-dual community, a kind of a heaviness held in my field, a negative energy, seeing the non-dual community as wrong and bad in certain ways. And I'm grateful to you for asking these questions, because it's illuminating that in me. It's showing to me the ways that I'm out of alignment with reality, the little pockets of resistance that exist inside of me, that prevent me from being in a greater sense of unity, because there's a part of me that's pushing that community away as if it's not me. I don't want to be connected with them. But that isn't the right approach. That's not the approach that I want to hold within me. So I thank you for helping me to see that in myself. And I'm glad that I have this opportunity to speak my process out loud, because this is much what my life is really like. You know, I'm experiencing resistances and openings, some immaturity in my psyche, like sometimes I'll get angry about things. My partner can attest to this. Sometimes I'll get angry about things, and then really I'm kind of blowing things all out of proportion, and it's more like some kind of old childhood wound or something that I'm projecting on things. So thank you for your question, which is allowing me to see this more clearly, and I hope that me sharing my personal process honestly will help, just help to normalize what it is to be a human being who's having awakening experiences. And I have had some pretty profound awakening experiences and hold a high level of consciousness, and I'm not beyond any of that stuff. I'm not beyond immaturity and childishness and getting irritable about things and pushing things away when there's no need to. I just want to be very honest about my journey and be sincere about that, because I think there's a real lack of that sincerity in much of the modern spiritual world. So I'm really grateful to you, Matt, for your question, or your questions. I hope that it's been helpful to receive what I've shared. I hope that my own resistances haven't been picked up on a conscious or a subconscious level as if you are wrong in some way, or that your questions are wrong in some way. If so, I apologize, and I return any of that negativity that has been inside of me from my journeys into non-duality. I return that to myself and allow it to be resolved in the light of non-judgmental consciousness. So I wish you well, and I wish everyone here well. And if you'd like to leave your own questions and comments below, I'd be really happy to read those and get back to some of them. Maybe create some videos based on the questions. Also, I'm trying to do more self-promotion at the moment, so please do like, comment and subscribe. I'm really enjoying building this channel right now, and you doing that is really helpful to me. It's very supportive of the work that I'm doing here, and will really help build the channel and help more people find me and the energies that I'm flowing to people. I am the self, helping the self to know the self. And also, if you want to go deeper into the channel teachings of the dragons, we're running the online initiation Dragon Medicine. We currently have 2 groups that are going, and the next group will begin in September. It's on the 18th of September, which is a Wednesday. Going on my Berlin time, it's at 5 p.m. here, which I think is 11 a.m. Eastern time and 9 a.m. Pacific time, but please do check that. Do check your time zone. I'll put a link in the description below, so you can read up on Dragon Medicine if that's something that seems appealing to you. So thank you so much to Matt for your questions, and thank you to everyone watching. I've been Jack Morrigan, and you're watching My Rising Rose.